Welcome back to the Quiet on Set podcast powered by Cineman. I'm Ewan and I'm joined by Lachlan Thiele for this little special review today. What's up, Lachlan? We'll talk
Hey, man.
about All Quiet on the Western Front, and I can use my own language in this episode and can tell you the German title. Do you want to hear how this movie's called in German?
Yes, but quickly, I like to flex that I always use my language in every other episode, basically.
You're so impressive,
I'm
man.
so impressive, aren't
That's
I?
crazy.
No, tell me the title. What's the title in German?
Investen nichts Neues.
Investen nichts Neues.
When you say it, it sounds like you are saying a vow to someone. You're like, essentially, you just got married to me, is what I'm saying.
Oh, excellent.
No, this is actually a really famous novel from, I think, 1928, 29, by Erich Maria Remarque, which I got the book right here, because it is one that you read a lot here in Europe. I read it as one of my finals. I actually got tested on that and got my degree off of that book, being tested by it. So it's one that I hold dear to my heart, just because I've been forced to read it, but also because I really enjoy it. And this most recent readaptation over on Netflix really doesn't hold back when it comes to the action, the gruesome nature of war, the First World War. And I think to kick things off, I'll be reading the synopsis for the film, so you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Paul Baumer and his friends Albert and Müller act on by romantic dreams of heroism, voluntarily enlist in the German army. The boys enthusiastically march into a war they believe in, but once on the Western Front, they discover the soul-destroying horror of World War I. So that's Edward Berger's an 157-minute long World War I film that's been received very positively so far. 75 on Metacritic, 8 on IMDb, a 4 on Letterboxd. Really consistent in the rating as well. Not really big gaps between the different sites, which is usually an indicator for a universal, general, acceptance, liking of the film, which is great because it's also Germany's Oscar submission, and I think they have a good shot at getting in there, might even have a good shot at winning that international Oscar, and would be a great win for Netflix. Basically, after Apple participates 1 year, they're like, oh yeah, we'll take the trophy. But we'll see. Comes from the director whose most notable work so far has been limited or seasons of TV shows with Your Honor and Patrick Melrose, where he's worked with English actors. And I think the other one is with Bryan Cranston, maybe. And I'm not entirely sure. I'll have it up on screen right now. Lachlan, for a movie like this, a period piece, a war drama, lots of action, there's no available budget that I could find for it. But what would be your totally not backed up estimated guess of how much this movie cost to make?
Oh, wow. It seemed extremely high quality. I was overall, just as we quickly get into this, my thoughts on the film is that again, very positive, surprisingly positive. I didn't expect myself to go in liking this film. I don't know why. I had a weird feeling about it. I guess the trailer that I watched wasn't that crazy, but everything from the acting to the cinematography to the set design to the sound design is all really good, really high quality, but it screams at me that it's a very low budget film. Now, I don't know how much money Germany throws at movies. I'm just trying to think of a recent war film that was spent. Are we going US dollars? I want to say...
Yeah.
Ooh, let's go 25 mil.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much a good estimate to make. I mean, if you compare it to something like 1917, that cost like 90 to 100 million. But I feel like that's a more expensive movie to make, just because on the technical side, they are constraining themselves to a specific look and that one take look, right? And here, I think it comes from just really probably crunching the numbers and getting the best out of whatever you like. It never feels like they're limiting the scope of what they're showing, but they just tie it into the narrative really well. That like we get a lot of repeated shots of, I guess, them down in in the trenches and going out, and a bunch of people get killed. So it's like that same thing that you can reuse, but they use the environment really cleverly to make it seem like it's way more expansive than it is. And yeah, it has a super clean look, like that dirty, of course, because everything's dirty and muddy and disgusting and war. But it looks really clean on that aesthetic. Like, I think the cinematography is another really great standout, and I agree. The sound in this, holy shit, the sound in this is amazing.
Sounded great on my Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision enabled soundbar and TV system, as this is obviously a Netflix movie. So being able to watch it from home, you're only going to get the most out of it if you have a setup that's good. So I could definitely see some people being like, oh yeah, you know, it looks good, sounds good. But if you're watching it on a good setup, like, it really does help. And I guess this is going to be a big factor, because you go and watch it in a cinema, you know, cinema's a bit different here and there. So it's a really interesting conversation about, you know, personal home setups for TV and movies and so forth. But, you know, cinemas, you know, you have Dolby cinemas, then you have just standard cinemas, then you've got like little art house cinemas. Like, they all are very different, but you get that experience. You go watch a movie at a cinema, you get that experience. You don't really have that at home. So having something that's, you know, a decent setup, you know, a decent amount of sound systems are Dolby Atmos enabled anyway these days. It just sounded so good. Like, it's so good.
Right? Yeah, it's amazing. Like, the war scenes are so loud. You know, they're really ear-shatteringly loud, and they gotta be. We are playing it at the theater that I work at, and we had a bit of trouble getting the mix ready, because it is like really that loud. And our little art house theater maybe isn't like really up for putting that spectacle onto the best screen possible. But still, I think if you can go see it and you don't have an Dolby supported Atmos soundbar, I don't know the full name of your thing, Lachlan, then yeah, go see it in theaters. I think it will shake your seat, and yeah, see it on the biggest screen possible. Lachlan, let's get into our spoiler talks. So if you haven't seen the film yet, if you've read the book, you got a pretty good idea of what's coming. Hey, look, this bonus lecture here. It's a really good book as well. Like, I can't send it to you because it actually isn't German, and as you can see, I did have like,
it's
I have
annotated
markings in it.
Wow.
Yeah, because I did read it. So for my thing, I also, just FYI, I forgot everything. So everything was new to me when I was watching. The one thing that, now there's spoilers, was the one moment later on down in the trenches. I remember that like vividly in the book, because it's pretty much the highlight of the whole book to me, at least. But maybe we'll get into that. I think I want to start at the opening, because we've praised the sound. And I think the sound is a very distinctive choice here, where we go with a more electronic, more modern sound that feels like really harsh. It's like piercing, as we see these young teenage boys. You know, they're not men. They're boys march into war with excitement and being basically slaughtered one after another. I think it's a very clever way of starting with that different soldier, as it like ties back to our lead, and he gets his uniform. Really powerful moment to kick it off. Lachlan, what did you think of the opening?
It's such like, I enjoy movies that don't hold back. They just throw you straight in, and it's very interesting to have that for a war film, because for most of us, we're not going to experience anything like that. For a good 70% of the population, knock on wood, we're not going to experience another world war, because we've learnt from the previous two mistakes, and obviously all the spin-offs such as Vietnam, Korea, the rest of them.
Seriously, just called Vietnam a spin-off.
I call it, yeah. So, did you not see on the show notes that I've got a great joke about World War One, and the World War One was that it's unfortunately followed up by the much better sequel, World War Two, and then all the spin-offs such as Vietnam, Korea, and so forth, so forth. That's my joke that I had prepared for today. Thank you, everybody. I shall move on. But, you know, very similar to the men that were in this situation, you know, we go in to watch a movie and then we're thrown into this mess. Similar to that, you know, the war was glorified. It was a heroic, patriotic thing to sign yourself up, you know, fake your own age. You know, they set up quite early, but the first moment of experiencing that war with this one person, you kind of go, oh, okay, we're already in it. Boom,
That's a protagonist, right? You
boom.
don't know
You
yet
don't
that
know.
this
You
is
don't
not
know.
our
Boom.
protagonist. Yeah.
This guy dies. He's
Hmm.
fighting and he dies, and it's very dramatic. And then it's this montage of dead bodies and people pulling off the clothes of these dead bodies and taking off the dog
Hmm.
tags and stuff like that. And you go, what the hell is going on here? And then
Yeah.
you're introduced to your main characters and the exact same clothing
It's
that
Call
that
of
first guy
Duty.
did. First guy died
Yeah.
wearing those clothes that he died wearing. I handed off to our
Yeah.
protagonist, and it's such a like gory and dramatic opening that you just go, holy shit! They have no idea what they're about to walk into. Because we
Yeah.
just saw this guy die. These guys, no chance.
I think it's also, with good war films that are anti-war films, sometimes towing the line between idealizing war in a sense as well is not really walked closely because it's still the spectacle of war and
Mm,
destruction and murder. And I think here it's also not holding back on making that a part of the film, but I think that the dread is so you're like you're really close to the character, but you also feel like one step remove, where it's
yeah.
this like impenetrable force and happening. All the stuff's happening to our characters, not him causing it, although he's also part of causing destruction. I think ultimately his own downfall on where they end up with and die is all caused by their own ignorance towards it all, and it's completely unnecessary, by the end of it. So really, it's a movie that sticks really closely to the novel, and I think the novel had so many great just observations when it comes to war because it's based on the author Remarque's actual own experience in World War I. There's also, I think, a bunch of diaries that are attached in the version that I got, and it's really interesting because it doesn't feel like someone's retelling World War I from his perspective because it's exciting or it's like, look at this dread, but it feels very personal somehow, even after a century of this being done. It's a very worthy readaptation of the story. And I'm someone who likes war films, a good war film. Lachlan, can you speak on that? Are you someone who's interested in the war film genre?
Uh, I wouldn't say that I'm interested in the genre, but I can definitely say, and I think that you will agree that war films are some of the most emotional, but also emotionally draining films brought to screen
Yeah.
as a viewer because
Hmm.
it typically will depict and sometimes even bring to light some of the most despicable atrocities that have ever taken place on this earth, and
Yeah.
it can be terrifying from a perspective of just a viewer like us to go, man, that's crazy that happened, and then go, oh shit, this is based on a story that was written back in what was it, 1930,
Yeah.
1927,
Around that time.
uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
based on this guy's experience of World War One. And I think that most of us, similarly, when we watch a war film, most war films are very anti-war. Especially some of what I would consider are some of our favorites. Kubrick was an extremely
Yeah.
anti-war director. Paths of Glory,
Yeah.
super anti-war.
Yeah.
Doctor Strangelove and How I Stopped Learning to whatever the full title is, very anti-war.
Hmm.
Full Metal Jacket, very anti-war, but they're all very anti-war in different
Yeah.
ways. This is obviously
Hmm.
very
Yeah.
different,
Exactly. Yeah.
because I wouldn't say that those films you watch it and you go, this is very anti-war, but this film I don't think wants to say anything like that. It rather would tell
No.
this story of these young
Hmm.
lads going off to war and the mental strain of what it can be. And I guess this was more of a, I guess became more of a story of human connection and how really there is no difference between, yourself and myself from a, strictly, biological standard. uh, we're all both
Hmm.
human, but we
Yeah.
have decided to create wars based on so many factors, race, religion, just even just a war between two different countries, and by the end, they're making fun of the French, but at a certain point, Paul is he's trying to help a French dude out. He sees the disgusting side of him that was like, I'm gonna kill, 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 and he's
Yeah.
watching this man die in front of him, and it gets even worse when he pulls out his diary, sees that he's a father of a I think it was a kid, a daughter, and a husband,
Hmm.
and it hits you more.
Yeah.
So I feel like most war films that we have kind of like, well, I would list as my favorite war films are solely like, we are anti-war. We don't want war to exist.
Yeah.
There's other stories of the mental strain. Full Metal Jacket's very famous for that, and I would say Apocalypse Now as well.
Hmm.
But this film was a bit different in
Yeah.
talking about the human connection between two different sides. But no,
Yeah.
I love war
But
films.
yes, sir. I think what it also does is, I think I didn't bring that point across before, that it's not really trying to tell you, hey, I'm anti-war. It's through that connection, and it's not prefaced by like an opening narration. So this is before I went to war, and I didn't realize before then how terrible it was. It shows you the perspective of someone who's really excited to go into war, but all you get is just you as a person looking onto it. That's why I felt like I'm more distant to what's happening, because I got no control over what's about to happen that I know will happen. The character doesn't know it yet, and he's still in his own
Mm,
beliefs. And it makes for a morally gray character who's obviously killing, and they're killing each other, but you can't really say one on the other side is like, in this, at least the people fighting are at fault. At fault are those people who rigorously just want to keep fighting. And there's a couple of characters, I think, in the B plot when it comes to that general who just wants to keep on going, who's like very much on the bad side. And then you got Daniel Bruce character who just wants the fighting to end, who's working for peace, who's on the good side. And then we got him in the middle, where I think whenever we do scoot away from that morally gray area, the film becomes less interesting, because you essentially just want a hero and a villain in this to kind of figure it out. But ultimately, it is about like the pointlessness of this really stationary trench war that just claimed a bunch of people for not even anything for either side apart from death and destruction, which is really, I guess, the overall thing that World War One really was about, like the early appearance of tanks, and the heavy artillery fire that makes it impossible to I guess like move along and have a sweeping like advantage for either party in the war. So you end up basically fighting over the same piece of land for years. Which, not that if you have a sweeping thing where, as in World War One, where Germany was just like able to scoot over and get all of France, that's better. But it feels even more tragic as you can really see the pointlessness of this. There's not even like, why do we continue this? When there's nothing that is claimed apart from human lives. It just makes a really easy story to tell of like why war is bad. And I think that's why it's so effective as well. But yeah, what did you think about that like B storyline?
it obviously sets a like the B story obviously sets a very interesting comparison to the conditions of the war. Especially my favorite comparison is or at least a juxtaposition that they represent with these guys is the food they're eating. Like, it's just so many
Hmm.
close-ups and shots of this beautiful, yummy food that these fat, wealthy kings and lords, essentially, because I've been watching House of Dragons, so I'm
Hmm.
very much in a medieval mood. Uh,
Yeah.
they get to eat this delicious food while the people on the front lines are literally eating stale bread. Uh, so it sets a I guess a borderline of what conditions they're currently living in and what the people who are profiting off this war essentially living in. Uh,
Hmm.
so I did enjoy
Yeah.
the Beeline story quite a bit because it was just a nice
Right.
breather to get away from this intense fighting, these intense scenes that are
Hmm.
quite gory, very again emotionally draining. From a you connect with these young lads, and most of them get picked off one by one. But to have
Hmm.
these people in peace talks, essentially, or at least negotiations, or what was the word that you said?
Verhandlungen.
Excuse me?
Verhandlungen.
Verhandlungen. Uh, thank you. That's my
Close
German.
enough.
That's my German.
Yeah.
To have these war negotiations to fight and to end a war is very exciting, especially for one of those beeline stories. Especially with the German commander. I don't know what his exact title is. Who's
Bald
so
mustache. I don't
yeah,
know.
bald
Yeah.
mustache, very German man.
Very Austrian in a sense. I
Very
think
Austrian
he likes
German
to look
man.
at it.
Hope he doesn't
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
assassinated. Um, that
Archduke.
Archduke.
Duck.
Anyway,
Yeah.
to have a conversation about what he will be doing after the war with, I guess, one of his generals is super interesting because all he
Yeah.
is a man of war. He doesn't want this war to end because this is his life. This is what he's good at. The other guy has I
Hmm.
guess, a butcher, a storefront that he can go back to, a family business, but that's what
Yeah.
he has. The other guy does not.
Yeah, what's this? Yeah, he's like, what's a soldier's purpose when there's 50 years of peace? I think that's one of his lines, which is it's so
Um,
tragic, that
yeah,
the purpose that you find that he never loses that, whereas the other people who are on the front who die then realize, the cost that comes with it. Although I think they never really arrive at that where they hate their own country really. I think it
no,
really
no,
is
God, no.
at the end
There's
they're
not a
just like so
single.
relieved that there's war, right?
I don't
That's why
think
it's
there's
so
any
ambiguous as
anti
well.
like patriotism in this story at all because it is, I guess, it diverts from this story. Like, no one hates Germany, but it's these certain people that make these decisions that ended up killing thousands and millions of men. Uh,
Yeah.
this particular general by the end, you know, how much longer till the end of the war? Oh, like 20 minutes? Fucking send him out there. Send him out there. Let's win on a victory. That was, at that moment,
Yeah.
I completely, I think at that point, I really was just like drawn out by how many disgusting things I saw in this war. But to have this guy just send his men out after they've been celebrating for hours, to then send out these men in the last 15 minutes before
Yeah.
the end of the war to fight one last fight that wasn't necessary. It really made me go, this film
Mhm.
is not about, one side is bad, one side is, it's about these individual men who made terrible decisions in this war that just sent people to die. It's very familiar to Paths of Glory with the anthill, just sending men to die for no
Exactly.
reason
Yeah.
because of his own success. He wants to succeed. That's something
And that's
I
really
did draw
interesting
to
because
it.
Paths of Glory is just on the other side of these exact situations. It's the French
It's
that
the
have
French.
these, right? It's
Yeah.
played by English actors, but it's the French. And here we got the Germans. You can kind of see that what I said before. There's no real antagonist in this war apart from, like you said, the singular characters who just put people in the fight. And like you mentioned this just before we started recording that. For you, it's one of those films that you would have loved to, before we share our full thoughts on, get a second viewing in. So, what do you think would add to a second viewing for you?
I guess it's very similar because this is a foreign film to me. I have to read the subtitles. It's very similar to Parasite. My first
Yeah.
viewing of Parasite, I was like, "Wow, this is a great movie," but it wasn't until the second viewing where I could definitely take a bit more in. Similar to this, a second
Hmm.
viewing I think would allow me to reread scenes because as much as people want to say subtitles don't affect your viewing, they do because they take your eyes off of the screen for a moment. allowing me to
Yeah.
know what's happening in each scene without having to always read the subtitles would be great, because I could probably take more visual storytelling in. Because
Yeah.
that's what I did with Parasite.
Mhm.
Parasite, the entire time I was focused on what was being said, because during a film that you watch with your you know natural language, your normal language, I should say your first
Mhm. Yeah.
language. It's easier to watch because you can listen to them talking and you can hear their emotion. With
Mhm.
that, I have to hear their emotion, read the subtitles, and also keep an eye on what's going on in the scene instead of just watching the scene,
Yeah.
listening to both the emotion and what's being said. Which it'd be great to be multilingual and just speak every language on the planet, but I don't take away from that. It's just that I have to go back and watch a foreign film a second time to get the most out of it, since I was
Mhm.
essentially distracted in the first viewing trying to keep up with what was being said. But if I could go back and rewatch it,
Still
I
better than dubbing, though.
still
You
better than
know.
dubbing. Oh fuck yeah,
So
I fucking
yes.
forget dubbing.
Yeah.
I'd rather have the original actor in there speaking. It's like when I watched
Mhm.
oh, what was it? Dark, the first time on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Dark.
I think the first 2 episodes they were just automatically dubbed for some reason. I don't know why it was an
Mhm.
automatic setting,
It's
and I was like, "This is
horrific.
terrible. Can
It's
someone
horrible.
stop this?"
It's
And then I
there's
watched
there's
the season
another
in
yeah.
subbed instead.
That's a German series who has like a bunch of different voice casts who are terrible. I checked it out as well. I think after you mentioned it, I tried
Yeah,
that out. But there's one show, I think how to
Train Your
make
Dragon.
money online fast, or
Mm,
so no, how to sell drugs online
online
fast, or
fast. Yeah,
something like that. That's got like 2 seasons, and what they do, they get the German actors to do the English dubbing for their
Eh,
characters,
smart.
and it's a bit better. It's still not like it's still dubbing, but
Mm.
it's at least a tiny bit better. So I think this movie has a really good shot at, especially getting into that one of those 5 slots for the international Oscar nomination. I think it's a pretty safe bet that it will be in there. I think Close is another one from Belgium that I'll definitely be in there. Definitely be in there. My 2 favorites so far when it comes to international films, I think. Um, but Lachlan, where else do you see the Oscar chances in other categories where and some of the technical stuff where this might sneak in?
I'm just quickly looking through a bunch of different contenders, I should say. Drive My Car was last year, wasn't it? Am I wrong?
Sorry, yeah, Drive My Car was last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought I was getting it wrong. Well, sad news is I haven't seen a lot of foreign films this year. I guess the ones that I know of would be Bardo would probably get nominated, right? Because it's Alejandro G.
Iñárritu?
Inarritu.
No, I think it won't. Although it's
You
been
reckon?
getting better reviews since it released in Mexico, it definitely won't get nominated. I don't
Okay.
see it getting
I
nominated.
I
I don't
I've
know if it's even their submission.
some of the only there's only a few of these that I actually have on my watch list. One of those is Plan 75. It's that Japanese one
Yeah,
where
Japanese. Yeah.
I haven't actually seen any reviews on it just yet. Have you seen it yet?
I've seen it.
Is it
Incan.
good?
It's pretty good. It's got a shot, but I think Decision to Leave is another one that I kind of forgot. I think it's close. Decision to Leave, All Quiet on the Western Front, and let's actually have a quick look over on Gold Derby, the site where you can kind of do the betting and stuff like that on all of the Oscar stuff. Let's see if I can pull it up. Yeah, so for the international thing, they don't have something up on Gold Derby just yet. I just noticed, but they have a list of like leading contenders. Apart from what I mentioned, Close is one of them. Let's see what. Yeah, Mexico's submission is Bardo. I don't really see that going in. I've heard really great things about the Irish submission, the Irish Girl, but apart from maybe Corsage, I think that's one from Austria that could get kind of get kicked out of that lineup. Poland's EO, the donkey film. But apart from that, I think All Quiet is definitely gonna be a nomination in the international uh, best international feature section. But I also think it's got a shot for maybe not cinematography, because that's sometimes not really tied to the best looking film. It's sometimes a bit odd choices that
Mm.
make it in there. But I think that something like sound, especially because they like it when there's a lot of sound in there, and All Quiet has a lot of sound. So I think it might get a nomination there. Probably not adapted screenplay, but I think it's also a really solid screenplay, especially knowing the base language it's based on. It's like sometimes you think dialogue is good in a foreign language just because you don't really know what the intonation is or like how they perform it, and then it's a bit stale if you actually speak the language. But I think it's really solid here. And I don't know if there's any other categories that it would sneak into. I think the makeup effects are also incredible. Like this movie is really brutal to look at. It's pretty to look at from the cinematography standpoint and lighting standpoint, but from a war standpoint of seeing people being shot up and killed, I think it's very solid work as well. But Lachlan, let's have a bit of a discussion on war films overall. So I think this already shoots up high in my list on war films that I really enjoy. But what would be some of your favorite war films?
Number one would be Tropic Thunder.
Right. Okay.
Do you like that one?
You love it when they do blackface.
I love it. Oh Jesus, no, God, don't say that.
No.
I think I said three of them. I'm a big Kubrick guy, and I really enjoy Doctor Strangelove, Paths of Glory, and Full Metal Jacket. I think that those three are really great war films, all from the same mind, but three very different ways of telling, hey, fuck war, they suck. But other than that, Platoon, Apocalypse Now, like I really love Apocalypse Now. I had the 4K of it, and unfortunately my 4K DVD was defective. Turns out it was a batch of them, and halfway through the dinner scene, all audio cuts out for the rest of the film. All audio.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where you watch it. Blu-ray, 4K, all of it cut out, which was unfortunate.
Have you watched the extended version?
I think I have.
Now?
No, I think I have. It was like the final cut.
Because like it extends the dinner scene as well.
But no, yeah, I would say that there are a number of those films. I really enjoy the Vietnam war films, like Full Metal Jacket and Inglourious Bastards. Apocalypse Now. I find that those two are very fascinating, but at the same time, it's like, what would you consider a war film? Because I think Inglourious Bastards is a great example of a more modern take on a war film that's really fucking good. Like, really good. I find it really awesome, but it's a hybrid of so many different genres with Inglourious Bastards. Yourself?
Schindler's List, I think, when we got to know each other, was probably my favorite film. I think our introductions at film school were like, what's your favorite filmmaker? And I was like, oh, fuck. I don't know. Spielberg is the most basic answer ever. And I think Schindler is also now the basic bitch answer for best war film. It wouldn't be my favorite war film now, but I think it's really, really solid in making you feel the dread and just the destruction and the force that was just done to people and that they were subjected to. So I think that's a really effective one. You mentioned Kubrick. I love all of his war takes, but Paths of Glory, I've said this when we did it like 2 years ago when we did a full-on, what did we call it? A deep dive, exactly, and went through the entire filmography of Kubrick. Like I said, there still is. Paths of Glory is my favorite Kubrick film. I think it's really effective in what it's trying to tell. Some animated films from Ghibli, like Grave of the Fireflies, might be my favorite Ghibli film overall when I want to be in a downer mood.
That's again like a unique kind of like war film. Like I could also say Pan's Labyrinth. I think it's a good example of, you wouldn't traditionally, you'd go fantasy, yes, but it's like there is an aspect of that film that's so based on war and anti-war. It's an exciting film to kind of say, what's your favorite war movie? And you go, well, what about if I say again, it's not the focus. It's definitely a fantasy movie first, but there is a large aspect of a war in that one. That's a unique kind of
No, it's
idea.
definitely a war film. Yeah. Well, something other like where we go into the future, and not as much science fiction. I think that the Planet of the Apes films, at least, especially I guess not War for the Planet of the Apes. I think that one is a bit weaker, but the one before, is it
Rise?
actually Rise? No, not Rise.
Rise
No,
is
I think War for the Planet of the Apes. No, that's the one I'm thinking of. I thought that War was the last one, but that's not the last one. That one's really solid, with like human against ape there. And you mentioned Vietnam. I think that a film that really deals with the trauma, the PTSD that you get from being in war. The Deer Hunter, another classic that like works really well within that genre.
mm,
um and yeah, even fictional wars. Oh, I guess I don't know how much. I don't remember it precisely. I just remember really liking it. The Wind Rises, also a Ghibli film from Hayao Miyazaki, uh where it's like about like someone who designs planes, if I remember it
mm,
correctly. So the genre is very like vast, and what is probably my personal favorite war film of all time. It was also, I think, one of my four favorites when we did like that quite unsaid favorite films earlier this year, is Come and See from 1985. That's from the perspective of a kid from Belarus.
mm.
I don't know if it's also translated into White Russia, which is the German translation, which is, I don't know, it's just a weird name, but it's Belarus, where the Germans march in and basically just are not really seen on screen as much. You just kind of see a lot of the aftermath. And I think that's also the most intriguing part of what it is. And I think All Quiet on the Western Front is really showing you in the moment what war is, but not really the repercussions. The repercussions is what you do after the film, when the dread has kind of settled, and when the dust has settled and the dread kicks in as you sit on your couch, contemplating life. It's like, holy fuck, so many people died for basically nothing. This is so incredibly sad and infuriating.
One more, I guess, shout out to a war film, and it's probably one of the more recent ones that I actually had. It's a Vietnam one again. I don't know what it is, but the
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam War was just an interesting setting for films, I guess, because there was a lot of shit that went down. I
Yeah.
had this film recommended to me by my good friend Kenny Rimmer. Good lad, great movie genius as well. Rescue Dawn. It's the Werner Herzog war film
Yeah.
with Christian Bale in it. It kind of just came to me
Yeah.
just boom, because it was a war film that I recently watched that I wasn't expecting to like too much, but because obviously
Yeah.
Herzog's filmography is absolutely wild. It just ranges from like documentaries to weird art house shit. And this was a really interesting one. Christian Bale stars in it. But yeah, that was like another war film that I absolutely loved.
I don't know if you noticed, but 10 years before, he made a film called Little Dieter Needs to Fly,
I haven't seen
also
that
by
one,
him, which
but
is a
I know of it, but I
documentary.
haven't seen it. Yeah.
You know that's he's the character this is based on, Rescue Dawn.
Oh really? Oh wait, no, I think
Yeah,
I know
so
this one. Hang on, yeah, little.
I wrote a small paper on like the differences from the adaptation of having like a documentary into a film, and
Mm,
I think that's a really like Werner Herzog is such an interesting
yeah.
director overall. I took a class on him, I think a year or two ago at uni, and yeah, got to see Rescue Dawn as well. That's another really interesting, kind of not too well known, I think, war film, because it also is a bit weird at times.
Well,
But
that's
but yeah,
Herzog's film style. Weird.
it is a kind of him injecting himself into like a lot of his
Let me
documentaries.
see the
It's
baby.
It's one of the people that like it's funny. We had a couple guests on for four favorites. One of them, Marius Kuhn, was the one who taught that Werner Herzog class,
Oh,
and the other one, Alan Mutley, who's a film critic, has seen the entire filmography of Werner Herzog. So a lot of our guests are really big fanatics when it
Yeah.
comes to Herzog, and I've just kind of been trading behind. But I've seen a fair share of this. I've seen I've only seen 10 of 77 films. But yeah, we're getting off trail from the topic of
Yes.
war.
Yes.
So maybe let's close it out. You got a whole bunch of recommendations if you want to see good war films over here. Although I did hear from a bunch of people, because we are showing that, shout out again to my local theater that I work at, that a bunch of people who went to see another film were like, oh no, I don't want to watch that film. Not because it's on Netflix, but because of the dread that they don't want to experience. And I think that's a very fair argument why you dislike a film, because I've seen like we went over the ratings and it's been like super positive from the people who've seen it, who see the artistic background in it. But I've seen a bunch of reviews who were kind of negative on it just because they were like war. I think it's a silly argument to say like, oh, we in the current state of whatever right now the world is in, it's like dreadful to see that. And I think like, well, you can make that argument like every time you just don't like war films. I feel like there's always some war going on. It's just like from your mostly Eurocentric or US perspective, you sometimes care less about certain things than others. But I think it really makes a case for being worth being seen, by this, because it's a great story that's told. But I'm trailing off, Lachlan. I'm repeating myself. So let's get to our rating of the film. Maybe I'll kick it off. I'll say this is a 4 out of 5 for me. Really solid film, really a great war film if you are interested in that genre. And yeah, what about you, Lachlan?
I also gave it a 4 out of 5.
Hey yo, quiet on set in
Phenomenal
unison.
storytelling. That's a
Mhm.
4 stars from Quiet on Set.
But yeah, that wraps it up for our review. Now let's have a look at the picks of the week, which I think will tie over into the overall war theme. Lachlan, you want to kick it off?
Full Metal Jacket. I love it. Why?
Hell
Because
yeah.
it's only 2 hours long. Well, it's just under 2 hours long, so it's a very short film, but it depicts
Mhm.
2 different styles of war film. The psychological, which
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now does throughout the entire thing, but also the
Mhm.
grittiness, the seriousness, the disgusting atrocities that have taken place on planet Earth. I've got the 4K.
Yeah.
I'd highly recommend it. It looks absolutely stunning in 4K. One of Stanley
Mhm.
Kubrick's best films. Would I say it's my
Yeah.
favorite Stanley Kubrick war film? It's hard to say. I still kind of throw it up between Paths of Glory and Full Metal Jacket, but in this
Mhm.
instance, fuck it, I'll say it. I think that it's one of the best war films ever. Apocalypse Now, I would say,
Yeah.
is on par, but there's something about Full Metal Jacket, especially in relation to this film in particular, with All Quiet on the Western Front. I feel like
Mhm.
All Quiet does do a decent job of the atrocities that take place, and I think Full Metal Jacket does a very similar job, but I think it does an excellent job of saying war is bad, and I think that's a very important message that should be thrown across everyone's face. War is bad.
War is bad. So that should be the title of today's episode. Because it's the same sentiment you get when you watch Come and See, the movie I just mentioned before. Second highest rated film over
Is that the one with
on
Millie Bobby Brown on the
Letterboxd, by
cover?
the way. That's actually pretty. Oh, that's really funny. Like, that's up there as your top 5
Hang on,
best
I'm
jokes
doing a
you've ever made.
Photoshop. I'm doing a Photoshop right now.
But no, it's that film. It's streaming on the Criterion channel. I don't own the 4K. I would love to be able to hold it up, but I don't own it. But a great film. Go seek it out if you are in the mental state similar to that you'd have to be to watch All Quiet. You'll be equally as dreadful during this experience. But I think it's a really valuable one to go through to get that depiction of war that is done massively. It's not just one of my favorite war films. It's one of my favorite films, period. So go check out Come and See. So that brings us to the end of our review. Soon we'll be reviewing the second film in the Black Panther franchise, Wakanda Forever. So come back next Tuesday for that one. In the meantime, you can subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss any other videos, and leave a like. Helps us grow the show a lot. You can also follow Lachlan and myself on our socials. You'll find them linked below as well. The Quiet on Set podcast is powered by Cineman, and we got new episodes every week. So come back, tune back in, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.